So you finished the endocrine PowerPoint and now you're ready for more. All right, we're going to get started on the heart. You may have noticed that we couldn't count in the right order, jumping from 17 to 19, but don't worry, we are going to complete blood. It'll just be in Unit 2. So let's get to know our cardiovascular system. First, where did that word come from? Cardio actually comes from the Greek word cardia, meaning heart, and the vascular comes from the Greek word for vessel. So it really means a heart vessel. Our cardiovascular system is composed of both the heart and the blood vessels that pump blood throughout your entire body. So these two things combined are the cardiovascular. The most important part of that cardiovascular system is going to be the heart. This is a very muscular organ that acts as a pump to power the entire cardiovascular system. Now, this little animation is actually showing us a good example of how a heart works. Fluid is pumped up and out, up and out. And this continues forever. Now, your heart is going to work in much the same way. We're going to have fluid coming into the heart, going into the ventricle, and then being pumped out to either the lungs or to the body. Now, we don't normally see this view of the heart. We're used to thinking of it kind of heart-shaped, but this is going to be a realistic animation of the motion of your heart with every single beat. So the cardiovascular system has that pumping heart at the center. Then it has arteries, blood vessels taking blood away from the heart. Where? To the tissue, to your feet, to your hands, to the tissue in your cheeks whenever you blush and they turn bright red. That was blood that went to capillaries, this place where the nutrients and the oxygen and your blood are going to be given to the cells in your body tissue. Now the waste in the old blood that's now deoxygenated is going to be carried back to the heart by veins, and when it reaches the heart, it'll pump and it'll be sent out. So for your blood to be useful to your cells, it needs to have a constant fresh supply of oxygen. That comes from your lungs. Your heart is able to actually pump to two places at once because there are 4 chambers of the heart. With each pump, we are pumping blood to the lungs to be oxygenated. This process is called pulmonary circulation. We're going to pump it out to the lungs. We eliminate our carbon dioxide and we bring in fresh oxygen. That comes back to your heart. Then you pump it out to the body, called systemic circulation. Think system-wide. And that's going to deliver that freshly oxygenated blood out to all of the tissues in your body, which comes back to the heart, travels to the lungs, gets oxygenated again, goes back to the heart, pumped out to the body, back to the lungs, back out to the body, back to the lungs. And this process just goes on forever. Now, the pulmonary versus the systemic. On this picture, we're going to see the heart and the entire network of those large arteries and veins. The capillaries are so small, we don't even see them on this picture. But these arteries and veins traveling throughout the entire body exist in both the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. So on this picture, can you tell what this arrow is pointing to or what this arrow is circled right here? What kind of circulation is this? And right here. If you guessed pulmonary, you are correct. This is where your lungs are located. So pulmonary circulation takes the blood to the lungs, oxygenates it, brings it back to the heart where it gets pumped out to the body through to our arms, down our abdomen, to our legs, up to our head, goes back to the heart, and then it gets pumped out to the lungs. So these 2 types of circulation are occurring at all times. Now, the big function of the cardiovascular system is to transport blood through our body. Now, it has to reach our entire body or cells will die. And with this blood that we're transporting, we're oxygenating it. Obviously, we're bringing in that fresh oxygen and we're removing that carbon dioxide. But that's going to be the function of the cardiovascular. It has to continually wash our cells with fresh nutrients and gases. It keeps you alive. Besides for those gases, it's also transporting the vital nutrients that we need, like glucose and those hormones we learned about in the last chapter. And it also removes waste products rather than letting them build up in our tissues and causing toxicity. Let's talk a little bit about where the heart is located. We have some ideas. If you've ever done the Pledge of Allegiance, you put your hand over your heart and probably put it somewhere around here. Now, how close were you? When it comes to the heart, if you look at a cross section, you're going to see that here are the ribs in front, the spine and the vertebrae right here, and then here in the middle is nestled your heart. It's pretty large. It takes up basically all of the distance between those ribs and the spine. Here it is seen from a frontal view. In this one, we're able to see that your throat here is going to be your larynx, your windpipe. This is in the middle, basically the midline of your body. So coming down, we can see that the heart is the majority on your left side. Just like whenever you put your hand over your heart, you put it on your left side. So you were actually pretty accurate there. We have several cavities in our chest. They're divided up into the pleural cavities that hold your lungs. And then in the middle is the mediastinum cavity. This cavity holds your heart. This view is kind of interesting. It's different than the last one that I showed you. And you'll notice that this is actually the back of a patient. This is looking at their backside. Now on this side, we're able to see that here the heart is predominantly on the left side of the body. And this picture helps because his left matches our left. Whereas on this picture, whenever you're looking at it, this might be your right. So we've been able to narrow down the location of our heart. It's located in our thoracic cavity, inside of the mediastinum region, enclosed, we'll find, in a tough fibrous layer called the pericardium. The heart is not completely vertical like you see in this picture. Instead, it's actually tilted a little bit, with about 2/3 or more extending left of the midline. So heart is located on your left side. The upper side of the heart, where we have all of our large vessels, where it's broadest, is called the base. And then the smaller pointed end of the heart, the narrowed bottom of it, is called the apex. Your heart is divided into two sides. The right side of the heart is going to receive blood that has come from the body, and it's deoxygenated. It's used up all of its good oxygen. It's not really useful for much anymore. It's going to pump that blood to your lungs using which type of circulation? Do, 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 do. Pulmonary circulation. I think you got that right. Now, once it's done with the pulmonary circulation, the blood has become oxygenated and it's going to go back to the left side of the heart, where it then moves into that lower portion and gets pumped out to the entire body in systemic circulation. Blood then uses up its oxygen, giving it away to all of your tissue cells, comes back into the right side of the heart, pumped out to the lungs, comes back to the left side. So in this way, the heart is able to do in one pump both functions. It can do both pulmonary and systemic circulation. Just a reminder, here's pulmonary going out to the lungs, coming back to the heart, going out to the body, coming back to the heart. The important heart structures that we're going to learn about in this PowerPoint include the pericardium, the heart wall, the heart chambers, the great vessels, and the heart valves. So let's get started. Here is the pericardium. Now, this picture looks kind of interesting. It has something gray wrapped around the heart. Have you seen that before? That is your pericardium. The pericardium is going to be a strong, fibrous outer bag layer with multiple internal layers that are going to surround and lubricate the heart, allowing it to be able to move with each pump without causing friction. A good example of the pericardium on its inside layers is going to actually be a fist as our heart. And then imagine you have a balloon. Now, a balloon, I'm sure you've done it before as a kid. You ever poked your hand or your fist into a balloon? And what happened? That balloon surrounded your hand, but it didn't pop, and there was still the air inside of the balloon. It just moved to surround your fist. Now, when it did that, there were multiple layers that were involved. First off, you had the innermost layer of the balloon that was pressed up against your fist. Your fist was basically coated in this plastic coating that was adhering directly to the fist. Now, around that was the airspace of the balloon, this area that you couldn't get rid of, that contained all of the air and kind of produced a buffer or a little bit of room between your fist and the edge of the balloon. Then you had the outer wall of the balloon on the outside. This is a good example for the inner pericardium because there's going to be a layer that's pressed up and adhered to the heart. Then there's going to be a space in between where we're actually going to fill with serous fluid, allowing us to have that lubrication so that the heart can move without causing any friction with its cavity. Then there's the outer layer of that pericardium. There's one more layer though. That's going to be the outer fibrous pericardium. Now this one is very strong. If we ever have the dissections where you have to cut the pericardium, the fibrous layer is the toughest one of the bunch. And this one is kind of like taking a plastic bag from the grocery store and just wrapping your whole fist and the balloon. So it just covers the entire thing, a strong layer. It's also going to anchor the heart. It's very difficult to tear. So that's your outer fibrous pericardium. Here are the layers with their proper names. First off, we have the outer fibrous pericardium enclosing the heart like a strong bag. The next layer is that outer layer of the balloon, the parietal pericardium. Then we have the pericardial cavity. This is that space in between that we filled with the serous fluid, allowing there to be no friction when the heart moves. And then we have the visceral pericardium. This is the layer that directly covers the heart surface. And it's kind of interesting. We're actually going to have this same layer renamed the epicardium in a slide or two. And here's a magnified close view of what we just learned. The fibrous pericardium. This picture really shows us how thick and strong that layer is compared to the others. The parietal pericardium, the cavity in between, and then the visceral pericardium. This does a good job of showing us why the visceral pericardium has two names. If you'll notice on this picture, it shows the heart wall, which is pretty thick, has a top and a bottom, and the top of the heart wall is actually the same thing as the visceral pericardium, just has two names. It's either the bottom of the pericardium or the top of the heart wall. Here is a cat heart that has had the pericardium cut and pulled away from the heart, that outer fibrous pericardium. And you can see it actually was probably pretty tough to cut, but it does surround the heart much like a bag. The walls of your heart are very thick and muscular. They actually look a lot like a steak. They're formed from three layers. The outermost layer is called the epicardium. It's that visceral pericardium we just talked about. And on our models, you're also going to see some fat in this layer, so it might look yellow on a lot of our models. Inside of that, we have the real meat of the heart. The big function of the heart is it beats nonstop for your entire life. And it's going to be beating using its muscles. So it's going to be one of the longest acting muscle in your entire body. It never stops working. So because of that, it's very thick, strong muscle, more like a steak than an organ like you'd see if you ever see pieces of liver for sale at the store. They're kind of soft and slimy. A heart's like a steak instead. It's a muscle. This picture shows us the muscle of the heart, and it's called the myocardium. The endocardium is the smooth inner lining. It's just nice and slippery. This picture shows us the epicardium, that outer layer of the heart wall, actually pulling it away. Here's that thick, meaty myocardium, the steak, and the smooth, shiny endocardium on the inside. We already mentioned that your heart has two sides, a right side and a left side. But how it's able to function is it has four chambers. Two upper receiving chambers that receive the blood coming into the heart. These are called the atria. Individually, they're called the atrium. So we're going to call those the right atrium and the left atrium. The atria, they are the receiving chambers. Blood comes into the heart. Once it comes in, it drains down into the ventricles that are V-shaped. Kind of helps you tell them apart. So your ventricles, there's one on the right side of the heart and one on the left side of the heart. Their job is to pump the blood out of the heart through the vessels into either the lungs or the body. So this is where we have that powerful pumping action of the heart in those lower ventricles. On here, we can see that your left ventricle has a very thick wall. Think of a really thick steak. Whereas your right ventricle, not as much. It's pretty thin. Why? So the answer to that question lies in understanding which side is pumping where. The right side, this right ventricle, is going to be pumping out to the lungs, which distance-wise isn't all that far, but the left ventricle, that's going to pump out to your entire body. So we need to have a very large, forceful pump that's going to push it out. So we're going to see a much larger heart wall of our left ventricle. And if we do dissections, you'll be able to see this in that dissected heart as well. The left ventricle is much larger than the right. The structure that separates the left and the right side of the heart is going to be called the septum. This is going to be a thick muscular wall. And normally, in a functioning heart, there's going to be no gaps or breaks or holes in this wall. Sometimes there can be a defect where there's actually a hole here in the septum. This is called a septal defect. This is very bad to have. Can you guess why? Maybe something to do with which side is oxygenated. If you have deoxygenated blood coming into one side of the heart, and then instead of pumping out to the lungs, it can go through a hole into the other side of the heart and get pumped out to the body, you're actually just mixing those two bloods, the oxygenated and the deoxygenated, and you might have a percentage of the blood going out to the body actually having enough oxygen. So we need this septum to be complete and whole and to provide that division between the two sides of the heart. Let's talk about the great veins that bring blood towards the heart. First, clear up a little bit of confusion that tends to happen here. Whenever you look at pictures of the body, diagrams, normally veins are shown in blue and arteries are shown in red. And the reason why we do this is that our arteries are normally carrying oxygenated blood, which is going to be a brighter red color. So we normally illustrate that in red. Your veins, on the other hand, have low or to no oxygen. So we're going to see them being a darker red. And just for clarification, those are normally shown in blue. Now with the heart, we're going to see this changes a little bit, because if you remember, pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation are both occurring, and systemic circulation is going to be bringing the blood from the body back to the heart. That is the superior and inferior vena cava. These are these great veins that bring blood from the upper body, so your head and your arms, through the superior vena cava and empty it into the heart. Your legs and lower abdomen come up through the inferior vena cava and get deposited in the heart. This blood is then going to get pumped out to the lungs and come back to the heart. So we are a vein because we're coming to the heart, but our pulmonary veins are red. Why? They're carrying oxygenated blood, so they're going to show up as red. So this is one spot where a lot of people get confused when they get to the heart between the veins and the arteries. So remember, you don't have to be an artery to be red. You just have to carry oxygenated blood. And you don't have to be blue to be a vein. You just have to have deoxygenated blood. And that's why we're going to see a red vein here in the heart. Here we have the arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So the big one is going to be the aorta. It shows up here in bright red, and it's carrying blood out through systemic circulation out to the entire body. So this is one of our biggest blood vessels. And this guy, he holds up to a lot of pressure. So we're going to see the aorta coming off here, actually travels behind the heart and goes down into the abdomen as well. So that's going to be shown in bright red. Now what about this little area here in blue? What is that? That is the pulmonary trunk. Now the pulmonary trunk is going to branch and go to the right and the left lung. So this is carrying deoxygenated blood out to our lungs to get it filled with oxygen, and then later on bring it back to the heart through the pulmonary veins. So on this one, it's blue, it's deoxygenated. That's part of that confusion. So our pulmonary trunk takes the deoxygenated blood out to the lungs, branches off to our left lung, and branches off to our right lung, and then the pulmonary veins are going to bring it back into the heart once it's oxygenated. And we'll learn more about that in lab too, but helps to try to kind of explain that over here. Now in your heart, we want to ensure that blood only flows in one direction. Think about what would happen if blood went from your heart back to your lungs and then got pumped back out through your veins. There's no oxygen, you can't breathe, we're not able to get nutrients to all of our cells. We have to have it going that forward direction. It has to pump from the right side to the lungs, to the left side, to the body. We cannot go backwards. And the reason why it doesn't is because of our heart valves. These guys are essential to our life. If one of these starts malfunctioning or can't work properly, you begin to have heart murmurs, you won't be able to breathe properly, and it can cause you to die. So these are very important. Now these structures, we have 4 of them total in our heart. We categorize them based on where they're located and their shape. First off, we have the atrioventricular valves, also called the AV valves for simplicity's sake. These guys are located between the atrium and the ventricle. The valves that exist between these two are called the atrioventricular valves. Then we have the semilunar valves. These are going to be at the entrances to our arteries, and they prevent any of that blood from coming back into the heart after it's pumped out. Here is our atrioventricular valves in a closer view. These guys are regulating the blood flow between the atria and the ventricle. Now, these valves work by allowing blood to flow down into the ventricle whenever the heart is relaxed and open, but during a beat, it's going to compress and push that blood up, and it's actually forcing the valve closed, and it will not allow any blood to go back up into the atrium. So our atrioventricular valves are located on the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. The one on the right side has 3 cusps, and it's going to be called the tricuspid valve. The one on the left side only has 2 cusps, so we call it the bicuspid, but the other name for it is the mitral valve, and that name is a little more common. The mitral valve is located on the left side of the heart, and it's going to be between the left atrium and the left ventricle. One way to help remember this is that you try before you bi. So the tricuspid is the first one that blood is going to flow through. Then it will go out to the lungs, come back, come in with the bicuspid valve, and then get pumped out to the body. Here they are on this model. We can see the tricuspid on the right side of the heart, and then the bicuspid or the mitral valve on the left side. This view is kind of interesting. It is a top view of the heart, and we can see the tricusps on the tricuspid, 1, 2, 3, and then the bicuspid valve just has those 2 sides. So our semilunar valves are a little bit different in their mechanisms. They kind of act like one-way doors. Whenever the ventricle pumps, it's going to produce a lot of pressure and push the blood up through the valve, and in this direction it opens very easily, just stays open. Once the pressure's gone, it starts to fall and close again, and when it gets into this shape, it's not going to go and open. It stops right there. So it'll open, close, open, close. It won't fold back down and open that way. So when this blood goes out to the body, can't go back into the heart. So that's how your semilunar valves are going to work. These are located right here, leading from the right ventricle out to the lungs. So this is called the pulmonary valve. It's actually controlling the opening to the pulmonary trunk. The other one is going to be called the aortic valve, and it's going to control that opening to the aorta. So here we see the pulmonary valve coming off the top of the heart, and the aortic valve is right in the middle. This is just a little summary where you can really see the difference between the atrioventricular valves with their cusps and the strings holding them so that they can be closed against that upward pressure. And then the semilunar valves acting like those one-way doors that only allow that blood flow up but not back. Now on this heart, this beating heart that we saw right at the beginning, now that we've gone over a lot of those heart structures, which of these can you actually recognize? The right ventricle? That's right here. Now, if this is the right ventricle, then which valve is this? The tricuspid. Try before you buy. Which, if this is the left ventricle, which one is this? The bicuspid or the mitral? Now, this, our right ventricle, is pumping hard, and it's pumping blood up through this semilunar valve, the pulmonary valve. That's going to then go out to the lungs, come back to the heart, come into the left ventricle, and get pumped out through the aortic valve, which is actually hidden behind this piece of tissue, but we can't see it very well on this model. You can see the top of it right here. That animation showed us a properly functioning heart, which we would all love to have. But sometimes, due to age or other problems, your valves stop working properly. When this occurs, normally your doctor can diagnose it as a heart murmur. When he listens to your heart, it doesn't sound right, that lub-dub, lub-dub. Something's wrong. This can be from turbulent blood flow causes it to sound a little different. Now, the reasons for a heart murmur could be that one of your valves is not able to completely close, leaving it a little bit open, letting some blood leak back down into the heart. Or it could be that your valve isn't able to open completely, which is called valvular stenosis. Now, one of the ways that this can happen is that with your large atrioventricular valves, they are held in place and anchored by cords, which are actually your heartstrings. You have legitimate heartstrings inside of your heart. If you do dissections, they are basically strings. They're very tough and strong. You can kind of pluck at them and they don't break. But these anchors, sometimes they become damaged. And if that occurs, your cusp is not able to close completely. Whenever this anchor point has been removed, maybe 2 or 3 of these become damaged, but your valves can't function right. So we've discussed the circulation routes of the heart before. We have the pulmonary, heart to lung, and systemic, heart to body. And the blood flow route that we're going to see is the right side of the heart sends blood to the lungs, which sends it back to the left side of the heart, sends it out to the systemic body, which comes back to the right side of the heart. That's an exam question, by the way. Here's a good diagram of that blood flow. We're starting off in the right side of the heart with deoxygenated blood, carry it out to the lungs, where through our capillaries, we're going to bring that oxygen in, carry it back to the heart, take it into the left ventricle, pump it out to the body, where we go up to the head and the upper arms, down to the abdomen, down all the way to our toes, and we bring that deoxygenated blood back into the right side of the heart. With our heart being filled with all of this blood, isn't it strange that whenever people have heart attacks, they have them because the heart did not get enough oxygen? It's full of oxygen though, right? Not so. Look at the right side of the heart. The only blood it ever contains is deoxygenated. So the heart has to get its oxygen and its nutrients from somewhere else other than inside of it. It gets it from the coronary arteries. These are small arteries that are going to immediately come off of the aorta as soon as it leaves the heart. So we have the freshest, most oxygenated blood in your entire body is flowing through these arteries. They're going to come down and they're going to wrap around the heart in both directions, surrounding it, providing all of those strong muscles that are continually contracting all the oxygen they need. Since we're bringing in oxygenated blood, we also have to be able to take away the deoxygenated blood to collect it and leave the heart. We use the coronary veins for that. So they drain. They start off as very small veins, merge into larger ones, drain into the coronary sinus on the back of the heart, which empties into that right side of the heart. So that's where you can have heart attacks in these small coronary arteries that are providing the oxygen for your heart. Here's a few pictures for you to fill out. See if you can label all of the different valves. Name those guys. Name these valves and look at the blood flow through the heart. All right, that was it for the normal heart structures. The rest of this PowerPoint is going to cover cardiac muscles and heart disorders.